Thank you, Mr. Blumenauer. Ms. Jenkins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. In my district in Kansas, the pro-growth benefits from reforming our old tax code are just obvious. For example, the president of the Lawrence Paper Company, which employs hundreds of workers across 3 locations in Kansas and Nebraska, have recently committed to investing an additional $4 million in equipment over and above the original $9 million of investment that they had previously announced. The company attributes this increased investment as simply a result of the favorable business climate generated by the recently enacted Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Couple that fact with the additional good news from earlier this year that the company's employees received hundreds of large bonuses that went toward recovering holiday expenses, paying down bills, or reinvesting in their local community. And my point is even more clear. As a CPA, I know firsthand the old tax code was a nightmare to comply with, which added excessive time for companies and individuals alike to file. In fact, the Tax Foundation found that individuals took about 2.6 billion hours to simply comply with the old code annually. Therefore, things like doubling the standard deduction and streamlining the AMT and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were great ways to simplify the taxpayer experience for millions and millions of Americans. So, Mr. Motto, with added investment and increased simplification in mind, last year I asked your perspective on how the old tax code's overly administrative nature made operating your business unnecessarily complicated. Has tax reform allowed your company to work toward addressing the goals that you mentioned in last year's hearing? And if not, then what other positive long-term developments do you expect are now possible thanks to tax reform?
Thank you, Representative. That's a great question. I think for me, kind of as I touched on, we're still working through the tax code. We don't have a fleet of accountants and lawyers to tell us exactly how it's going to impact us. But again, what I've seen is very positive from my customers, and that's really what I'm concerned about. I make money when we're busy, when we're pushing product out the door, and when we're profitable, I'm happy to pay taxes, a reasonable and fair amount of taxes. So, I think as the rules and the guidance comes out, my company will understand it better, and we will be able to make better plans. But I see good things happening, and I already, we've invested in some capital equipment already. I see good things happening for our company. So we'll figure it out, and we just take the good sign as the demand coming from our customers right now.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, do you see any trends for small and mid-sized manufacturers around the nation in Kansas or in Illinois, in Mr. Mottle's case, that would point to increased and unforeseen benefits for both employers and employees in the years to come from the tax reform bill?
I think there are 3 things that are important there. The first thing people look at are the direct benefits, and the pass-through provisions are going to affect a lot of the small businesses and the growing businesses. I think the concern over the complexity has been overstated. Most businesses are under the threshold. They're going to get it without any consideration at all, and so complexity exists only for the most successful and the most able to deal with it. So that's sort of point number 1. Second point is, large and small businesses exist in the same economy. If the economy is producing better, both are going to benefit either as suppliers or as consumers of large business products. So that's in there and often overlooked. And then the third thing is the capacity to start companies is really important. And it has been an Achilles heel of the U.S. economy during the recovery. It is one of the great sources of employment and productivity growth, the things we care so much about. If you go back to, for example, the late 90s, simply the invention of new business models was the source of half the productivity growth during that boom. And so I think the opportunity to start new businesses in areas that we really don't fully appreciate right now with new business models is the hidden part of this thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.